Well, welcome to Botanical Medicine with Stephanie Georgieff. I'm your host, and it's time once again for our weekly feature, This Week in Botanical Medicine. And the world of botanical medicine has quite a few notable updates, all sorts of interesting developments in quality assurance standards, and significant dynamic in the global markets. But I'm really interested in a couple of these updates, which I think are really important. And again, this all has to do with quality control and basically understanding how botanical medicine works so that it can be utilized more effectively and efficiently. And our first update is on policy and quality control, and it's specific on echinacea adulteration. And because botanical medicine is becoming such a powerhouse in terms of market trends and how much people are basically spending on these things, unfortunately, there are producers and product makers that aren't always necessarily truthful in what it is that they are selling. And so there has been a Botanical Adulterants Prevention Program, and it's called BAP, B-A-P-P. And this is a collective effort by the American Botanical Council, which I highly recommend that you join. It's a wonderful organization. And the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, the AHP, and the National Center for Natural Products Research, that's NCNPR, they have released a critical laboratory guidance document specifically tackling echinacea adulteration. And it's mainly because echinacea, and there are three main echinaceas that are on the market: Purpurea, Augustifolia, and Palladia. These consistently rank among the top 10 selling herbal dietary supplements globally, and it's mostly used for respiratory health. So if you have a sore throat or a cold or flu, this is what people take. It's basically an antiviral. And unfortunately, the marketplace has faced ongoing challenges with species substitution and subtherapeutic quality. And these new guidance that has been released with this laboratory guidance document, this provides updated analytical methods to help labs who are creating these things differentiate between authentic root and herb extracts and fraudulent materials. And basically what this does is it marks a strict push towards tighter supply chain transparency and quality assurance. Now, another development in pharmacoepidemiological insights. And I thought this was really interesting. And it's all in gender-specific herbal use. Okay. And there's been a push in the pharmacy world and medical research world to really consider that biological men and biological women, females, they metabolize pharmaceuticals differently. And so we need to make sure how we study things in terms of biological men and biological women, in terms of how to instruct the broader public, but practitioners specifically on how to utilize drugs properly. And the Society for Medicinal Plant and Natural Product Research, they hosted a seminar highlighting breakthroughs in evidence-based phytotherapies. And this was a focus on the release of analyzed data from what's called the Phyto-VIS study, which is widely regarded as one of the world's largest pharmacoepidemiological studies assessing how herbal medicines are actually utilized in real-world pharmacy and clinical settings. And if you know anything about research, and specifically in terms of, I would say, drug use, there are all these wonderful data that comes out from lab studies. And then when something is released to the market, the world at large, then you get an entire plethora of data in terms of real world use. So maybe in the lab, the rats didn't experience stomach upset, but when it was released to the general public and the general public started taking something, then there was stomach upset. And so that's why your package inserts are so large. And what they're doing is they're starting to look at botanical medicine in the same way. And so the study evaluated over 24,000 patient data sets to basically examine gender differences in herbal medicine efficacy and safety. And this basically was looking at efficacy and safety balance. They would look at, well, how does this herb work with a man and how does it work with a woman? So that's interesting, and also seeing how well things are tolerated, but in difference between men and women. And while overall safety remained equal, there were distinct usage pattern emerging from this study. And they found that men statistically used herbal products more frequently for acute respiratory care, which means cough and cold, as well as joint pain, while women used herbs more for managing anxiety, sleep disturbance, and bladder dysfunction. And it also, this research spotlighted ongoing multi-model preclinical work evaluating and the safety and synergy of traditional estrogenic herbs in breast cancer management. And so that's really interesting that they're looking at that. And so other notes that were of interest to me personally, but also just in the world of botanical medicine, they're looking at whole plant usage versus standardized isolates. Okay. And this is a big deal because it basically was how synthetic pharmacy started. They started isolating substances from plants and then synthesizing them and making them into drugs. But what a whole plant offers is a whole bunch of different substances in it, and usually in combination within the whole plant, it just has a different way that it acts. And so product development data highlights a growing consumer and formulation shift towards something called clean label. And people want clean label, organic certified, and traceable whole food-based botanical lines. And they're wanting that, customers are wanting that rather than single isolated chemical markers. So new product launches in this quarter are heavily emphasizing combinations of primary clinically supported extracts with their complementary whole plant matrix components. So it's interesting to me how markets adapt to consumer needs. And isn't it lovely that consumers are wanting organic, whole products rather than isolated things? And people read their labels, they read them. And there's also a really interesting thing in this new world of artificial intelligence. In manufacturing and pharmacognosy, there's a marked rise in utilizing AI-driven data analytics to map traditional texts, so these herbal texts, against modern genomic databases. And I am finding this just in my basic research, where I have learned that a herbal plant, Latin binomial is something, and then when I research it, it redirects, or there's a plant that I thought was in a certain family, and now it's in a different family. And in days gone by, a lot of this was basically, if a plant had certain characteristics like a stem size or a leaf shape or something like that, then it was in a certain family. But now what they're doing is they are doing biochemical analysis, and they're putting them into certain categories. And so what they're finding is they're using this type of technology, they're comparing it with traditional texts, and they're also using the data from chemical analysis to predict interactions between herbs. So I'm not sure how I feel about this, but that's what they're doing. And finally, there's a really interesting shift from the niche health food stores, where people are buying their herbal supplements in health food stores, to mainstream settings. And this is something I have noticed recently, which I find very fascinating, is that I can go into a regular pharmacy that sells drugs, and I'll find a whole aisle full of herbal supplements. And now, apparently, they're putting these herbal supplements into hospital pharmacies. So that's really interesting. And hospital pharmacies are projected to manage over 36% of the distribution share in certain regions. And I would argue this is probably more relevant in Europe and Canada, and also in Asia, as integrative medicine protocols continue to gain institutional grounds. So I think those are some really interesting updates in this week in botanical medicine. Make sure to check out the links in the program notes if you want to ride the wave and learn all about botanical medicine, so that you know what you're talking about through the Living Pharmacy course. So this is Stephanie Georgieff saying thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. And until our next episode in Botanical Medicine with Stephanie Georgieff, be well.